unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
What's up, everyone? This is Hater Radio. My name is Chris McLean. I'm here with my co-host, Ian Gibson. How are you?
After Saturday, not too great, but it is what it is.
Yeah, it was brutal. Saturday, Florida got destroyed in probably one of the worst fashions ever to a terrible Kentucky team. But let's go into the rest of it, because there was actually a lot of very good things going on in college football outside of this Florida program, which is a dumpster fire, to say the least. Okay, so the first game we had was on Thursday, UTSA going up against USF in Tampa. And, South Florida coming in the game, 6-2, looking to set the pace in the rest of the American Conference. And boy, did they ever. Within one play into the second quarter, USF was up 3 scores, and they didn't even touch the ball until like 2 minutes left in the first quarter. They were up 14-0 at that point. It was a bit of an implosion by UTSA for the most part, I would say, that first quarter. But the rest of the way, the offense just dominated, because USF barely punted the ball at all that whole game. Not really until they put in the backups did USF really get stalled on offense, because they were just gashing them. Byron Brown, 1 incompletion, 14 of 15, 239 yards, 2 TDs, 9 carries for 109 yards, 1 TD. So basically his average carry was like 10 to 11 yards per carry. And then his average completion was roughly 20 yards. So just a bang-up job by the offense. They dominated in every facet. And then defense, I think they did enough in that start that it never really could get UTSA in any kind of rhythm. They got some points in that first half. They had 10 by halftime. And then the backups got a little bit of points because USF's backups were in there. But this team, USF, just huge now, because next week the game against Navy becomes, like we said in the Memphis game, now all these games become the biggest game in program history because of what is on the line. So you've got this week against Navy, next week against UAB, and then back home against Rice to finish it off. So those 3 in a row, they've got to win out to win the American Conference, because right now, we'll talk about later, Memphis lost, so it opens the door for USF to not only play in the conference championship game, but potentially host the game. So a lot on the line here the next couple of weeks. Huge win. This offense is just dangerous. Singleton, monster game, great catches left and right, 2 TDs, just a sick game from him. What are your thoughts, Ian? Because this was tremendous.
Yeah, this was a much needed, win, especially coming back home with USF. They, blew out, and we were all saying this has got trap game written all over it, especially with, UTSA, beating Tulane the week before. And honestly, there were some worries, but honestly, first play of the game is a pick 6. And I thought, okay, that's a good start. And then the fumble recovery for the touchdown. And before they even have the ball, it's 14-0. And it was 3 minutes. I saw a stat that's only the 3rd time that has happened since the turn of the millennium that a team has been up 2 scores without even having the offense on the field. And after that, I agree with you. The defense did, I think, enough, especially in the early part. They definitely were kind of out there longer than what I would have liked. But the big thing, obviously, was the offense, because they were averaging 9 yards a play. They only had the time of possession. I get, USF is in the hurry up. But they only had the, ball for, I think, 20 minutes the whole game, and still were able to put up 55 points and almost 500 yards, which is insane. Great win for USF. And, they avoided the trap. because UTSA was definitely, they were airing it out. They were clearly doing whatever they could to pull off another upset, but USF was just not having it. And it's one of those things where it's either like the third or second quarter is really what makes or breaks USF in these games, because they had a fantastic second quarter or they'll have a fantastic third quarter to carry them. So that's something I've been noticing this season. But overall, fantastic game. Singleton, great game for him, 4 receptions for 2 touchdowns. And then Byron Brown, I'm not kidding. There needs to be a serious conversation about him going to New York, because he is doing things that we have not seen at the USF program, and we have not seen a lot of players do in the country right now. But he had another fantastic game, over 100 yards carrying. And the thing I love about him too carrying it is that he very rarely, I'm not saying it's a bad thing that you slide and, make sure you protect yourself, but he wants to get every yard possible when he tucks it and runs, and he does that. And yeah, the only one incompletion is insane. So great win for USF. But yeah, once again, it turns into next game is the biggest in program history. Now they got to go to Annapolis and do it again. Yeah.
Not only is it the stats that he put them up in basically a quarter and a half, Ian.
Yeah.
Like he barely played the first quarter, basically played all the second quarter, and then played like 1 or 2 drives in the third quarter. And that was it. Like it's crazy how efficient his day was. Like it was like 0 mistakes. Like you said, he's a battering ram. He takes on those defenders every time. He doesn't shy away, but he's really big though. That's the question. Like, that's the thing where it's like, some of these guys aren't as muscular as him. Like, he is like Cam Newton-esque. Like, I know his game is not the same because like Cam's got a stronger arm, but like, he can, power through hits, and he's fast. Like he can get down the field really quickly. On that one run he had, I think it was like a 30-yard run he had at that one point. And it's like, man, it was just like out of nowhere. It was like the play was kind of like slowly developing, and then he just takes it out wide, and boom, he gets like, 30 yards. So yeah, like you said, he definitely deserves to be considered for to go to New York for the Heisman top 5 at least. They put out a stat the other day after the game where it was like the last 30 years, he is the only quarterback in all of college football and all of NFL to have like, I think it's like 100-yard rushing and like 200 passing in like certain amount of games.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. It's something ridiculous, something to that effect. And it's just like, man, like that right there tells you when he's doing stuff that not only no college quarterback has done in the last 30 years and no NFL quarterback is doing, like he is setting the pace, and it's amazing. Like the kid is just stellar, and they have a real shot at the playoff here. This next game against Navy is huge, and I know we keep talking about it. We're going to keep talking about it till Wednesday. This is a huge game for them, and I'm hugely excited because, like, the one thing about it though that's interesting is Michael Kelly, the old AD for USF, now at Navy, and so you've got this interesting like little like wrinkle to the rivalry, and I don't know. I mean, at this point, Horvath didn't play yesterday for Navy in that Notre Dame game, and they got smoked. Like, if Horvath doesn't play, I feel like they're not as strong. But knowing how things go, I'm feeling like he's probably going to play against USF because that Notre Dame game didn't matter in the grand scheme of things for Navy. Because even if they lost that, they still have everything to play for. So they still have that as well with this game. So they still have a shot at the American Conference championship game. So they need to beat USF. So we'll see. You have any more thoughts?
No, just, fingers crossed. I mean, again, battered bull syndrome, but it's great to see them stay undefeated at home. I didn't do the homework, but I have to look up the last time I think 2017 was the last time that happened where they were undefeated at home.
Well, they got one more game. So
have been undefeated at home to this point.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. So, okay, moving on. We've got what game we've got? USC and Northwestern. I'm not going to spend too much time on this game. Northwestern's kind of an outmatched opponent. I mean, yes, they did beat Penn State, but I think outside of that, Northwestern is just kind of like one of those teams that's just middle of the road, like mediocre, not very like good per se. I mean, Preston Stone is a decent quarterback, but the rest of their skill players are just kind of whatever. USC was in this game though, and it was a bit of a a fight. It was 14-14. Mayava throws a pick. The defender is going for the touchdown, and Mayava hits the defender as he's heading to the end zone. The ball squirts out of his hands, goes through the end zone into the back line, and goes out of bounds and is a touchback. So not only does Northwestern not have the ball right there at the 1 for a possible touchdown or the really touchdown right there on the return, they get nothing. And USC gets the ball back, and then the very next play, King Miller just runs it for like 60 yards down the field, puts them in position, they score really quick, and that was it. That was literally the difference in the game. Like, it was like they had a chance to go up 21-14, and then USC not only stops that, but then turns it around and goes and scores the touchdown in just amazing fashion. This USC team kind of struggled there, in that first half, but they really turned it on, and they were able to score a ton on this team. And credit to USC defensively. They held them to 14 points for the most part. They got that late field goal, but no, 38-17 is a solid win. And, King Miller had a great game. Makai Lemon just proving he's wide receiver 1 every week. And then even Jacoby Lane had a decent game as well. Had 7 catches for 74 yards and a TD. So, this USC team, I don't know, they're poised to set themselves up for a potential playoff spot. They just got to keep winning. They have a tough road the next couple weeks because they have Oregon on the road, and they've got Iowa, and they've got UCLA. Iowa first, but the Iowa game is at home. I don't know. I might be tempted to go to that. That's an early game though, which usually I don't know. It's weird. Like USC usually gets like later games, but for some reason the game is early. Your thoughts, Ian?
No, I just think it was a great balanced game from USC, and it was getting a little close, especially in that second quarter, but especially that near the end score kind of did a 2-for-1 kind of deal with the second and third, start of the second, start of the third, end of the second, start of the third quarter. But Malachi Lemon had a great game. I think he had over 10 receptions and almost 200 yards receiving, and Miller too. Having that to fall back on with Mayava is really good, and he had a good game. I know he had the pick, but they just seemed more efficient with their drives than Northwestern was, especially towards the second half. Whatever adjustments they made at the half, I know they scored 17 points, and I think it was 10 unanswered. So they made sure that they were, having total control of the game once it was going into the fourth quarter. And that's the thing USC is at least built for. They are built for those situations.
Yeah. Okay, moving on. We've got Tulane, Memphis, the G5 game of the week. Ian, go ahead.
So they almost did it again. Memphis almost did it again, and I literally had the first time meme with the guy in the news, and he just is like, first time. I was going to be USF, and it was going to be Tulane, where this insane comeback in the fourth quarter where they scored a ridiculous it was 15 unanswered, I think. And they almost did it. But it's one of those things where Tulane, they just got way too far ahead, that even because that was a 3-possession lead that they had compared to the 2 USF had. And it just was too much, especially in one quarter. Give credit to Memphis. They weren't, I knew it. Even when it was like 38-17, I was like, Memphis ain't out of this, because I literally saw firsthand how quick they can score, and they did. They scored 15 unanswered. They made it a game, and Tulane was, very fortunate. Somehow Memphis put some voodoo trick on the other team where they just completely stopped scoring in the fourth quarter. And for Tulane, that is something they have got to address, because they got to win. This is a huge win. I mean, I cannot overstate how big of a win this is for Tulane, because now they are back in the driver's seat for the American, because now they're going to be what USF was this week. USF and Navy is a eliminator game for them now. So they're likely going to leapfrog into whoever loses that. So they got their toughest, game out of the way. They got the win, a really big win, and now they can keep moving forward. For Memphis, I mean, that is a heartbreaker because after that USF win and you had really a lot of momentum going into this one and you almost did, but now they need a lot of help now to get back into the race for the American Conference Championship. But for Tulane, huge win, and now they're, right back in it.
Yeah, because Tulane, their schedule is super easy. They got like Charlotte and some other bums. And then Memphis, on the other hand, has a really difficult schedule because Memphis has East Carolina, who's doing decent this year, and then they have Navy. So, like, those are two very strong opponents to finish out the year, while Tulane's got, like I said, Charlotte at the end, and then they've got Temple and Florida Atlantic. I mean, Florida Atlantic can score, and Temple's not completely terrible, but they're obviously not good either. So it's going to be, I feel like Tulane should win out. So that's 10-2. And then if that's the case, Memphis, I think more than likely gets another loss. I don't know. I just feel like they're set to lose one there. And then also with USF, it's going to be difficult. I mean, Navy is a very tough opponent, and the last two we'll see, because UAB has already beaten Memphis, and it's in Birmingham, so that's going to be a tough game. I think the Rice game USF should win, but still the next two are tough. But I just wanted to talk about Memphis a little bit. Man, Lewis had a heck of a game.
Yeah.
Like, he wasn't even in the whole time because he's dealing with injuries, but he was 29 of 34, 317 yards, 2 TDs. He did have that bad pick late. It was more so due to the pressure, and he was just trying to get rid of it and trying to hit the guy down the seam, but threw it into double coverage. I will say, Retzlaff, man, in that game, like, he had so many bombs in the beginning of the game, and I was like, oh, man, this guy's just all over the field. Like, the Memphis safeties cannot cover these guys. And then that just kind of disappeared in the, midway through the third into the fourth, and they really struggled. But Retzlaff to the rescue when they needed him to finish off the game. They needed that last conversion, and he just takes the ball and runs to the right, and boom, gets the first down, and that was it. So more power to Retzlaff. Memphis still has a lot to play for. Just a great game. It was great watching that Friday night. I didn't watch the USC game as much because I was watching this game because I was like, man, this is like Northwestern, you knew USC was going to win. But like this game, you knew it could be competitive, and it wasn't at one point. But then, like, as the fourth quarter got going, like you said, first time, like, this is definitely a team that is going to come after you, and they don't give up. They didn't give up against Arkansas, didn't give up against USF, and they almost got the best of Tulane here as well. Okay, moving on. We've got Georgia, Mississippi State. Just a blowout. I mean, it was close into the second quarter, but then Georgia turned on, the afterburners. Frazier had a huge game. He had a couple of scores, and Gunnar Stockton had 3 TDs. He had one to Delp and then one to Thomas. And, this game, I think we even talked about it. We thought that this was a possibility. And, Georgia is just a better team than, Mississippi State right now. Like, Georgia's playing for the playoff. Mississippi State is, at this point, 5-5. So they're struggling to be bowl eligible. We'll see. Chapin got hurt and wasn't in the rest of the game. So, that's who knows what will happen there for Mississippi State. But, they just really weren't competitive. They went up 7-0, and that was about it because they allowed Georgia 567 yards of total offense to their 322. Your thoughts, Ian?
Yeah, and this was just a matter of, being outclassed, to put a better word for it. I mean, Georgia just had more elite players, elite plays going on, and they knew how to win this game. As tough an environment it is to win in Starkville, it was not really that much of a problem for Georgia. They've been in this situation before. They're a well-coached team, and they just had the better team flat out, especially towards the end of the game. Mississippi State was pretty much running on empty, and Georgia had plenty left in the tank to just run away with it.
Yeah, really not much else to say. So let's move on. The game of the day. Not really, because this was the matchup of the day. It didn't end up being the game of the day, but BYU, Texas Tech, and the Red Raiders just, man, they took it to them. They really, dominated BYU. Mistakes by BYU in this game were costly. There was a muff punt that resulted in points for BYU. I will say BYU was able to keep them out of the end zone for the most part, and forcing them into field goals, which kept them in the game longer than they probably should have, because if Texas Tech was scoring touchdowns, they probably the game would have been 35-42 to 7 or something like that. But because they kept them from scoring touchdowns and just field goals, it was like a 19-0, 26-0. It was still it wasn't that far out of reach for BYU, but I will say Texas Tech's defense is gnarly. They have to be the story. Rodriguez, I know there's a push for him for Heisman. He had an interception and a fumble recovery. The kid's just all over the field. You can't even say too much about the offense too, because the offense for Texas Tech is just destroying people. And Baron Morton didn't have a great day, but he had a good enough day. And really the key for the offense for Texas Tech is their run game, because Cameron Dickey is just a machine. The kid just puts up numbers every week. And then Jacoby Williams had a good game. This BYU team is not a bad team, and they were kept in check for the most part. Only 255 yards of offense. And, this Tech team, it's funny because they actually allowed 4 sacks. So BYU was able to get to Baron Morton. And I did take note of that as that game was going on. But it wasn't as detrimental because Texas Tech was able to get points out of those drives where BYU was not. And again, BYU had 3 turnovers. So Texas Tech is usually in the plus column for the turnover margin, and it bears fruit here in this game, and it leads them to victory again. Your thoughts, Ian?
Yeah, first thing, and I'm always, I'm this guy of it. I can definitely guarantee you, uniform matchup looks great on TV. Everybody in the press box who was trying to track Texas Tech players was losing their mind because silver on white does not go. I don't know. I think that was a Patrick Mahomes design or whatever, but looks cool on paper, not great in execution. Anyways, besides that, I only mention that because I'm the loser who pays attention to this stuff. If I've been saying all year how good Tech's defense is, I know we talk about how good and how hyped their offense is, but man, did they make the NIL money worth it in this game? Because the offense, they didn't play bad, but they were not punching it in when they had the chance. As soon as they got into the red zone, they were kind of settling. They were getting those field goals, and that is a recipe for disaster. If you want to, we'll talk about that with the Indiana Penn State game, similar to that, where settling for 3 and not 6 can bite you. But that defense, literally, it was going into the fourth quarter. I'm thinking dude, BYU might get shut out. I could legitimately see they did get that touchdown, but by that point, I was like, there's no way Tech is going to give up more than 19 points right now, because the defense, they got 3 turnovers on them. Bachmeier, they're just having to rely on him throwing. And with, the rushing attack, they just completely took the run game out of the equation. So it had to be Bachmeier to win it. And as good as he is, there's no way by himself, him and Roberts could have beaten that Tech defense. So great game for Texas Tech, especially their defense. And now they're in the driver's seat, because now the only 2 Big 12 games they have left are West Virginia and UCF. So those they are very heavily favored in. So this is not a clinching scenario, but they should theoretically just kind of walk into the Big 12 championship now. For BYU, it's going to get interesting now because, I mean, obviously they were undefeated, but now they lose to Tech. Technically, right now, they're still in second place. So if they win out, they'll meet again in Dallas for the Big 12 championship, which would be a fantastic rematch. But their next game is against TCU, and then right behind them and in third place is Cincinnati. So if they beat TCU, that Cincinnati game is going to decide who's going to the Big 12 championship. And then they end the year against UCF. So the path is a lot easier for Tech. This was kind of a not clinching game with the two teams they play last. But with BYU, they have to refocus now because they're going to play a really tough TCU team, and they got to win out in that one. And then they play Cincinnati, who is just begging at the bit to, jump BYU right now. So great game for Texas Tech and their defense, and for BYU, it's time to get back to the drawing board because the work is not over yet.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, Texas Tech with this huge win, now they've got UCF and West Virginia. That's pretty easy. Like UCF is coming off that bad loss to Houston, and Tech is at home for that game as well, and then they've got West Virginia on the road, so they could easily win these out pretty handedly. Like you said, BYU's got a tougher road, but I think that Cincinnati game will decide everything for this Big 12 championship game. Okay. Let's move on. We've got the big game of the day, the one that ended up living up to some kind of hype, which we thought would have been in the start of the season, but ended up being such a tremendous finish. Like, this was Fernando Mendoza's moment. Like, this was, the drive was just spectacular. There was like throw after throw. Like, it went the length of the field. He, got sacked on the first play of it. He just kept making plays. Third down with like 30 seconds left. And he hits Cooper in the back of the end zone. And Cooper's like midair with his feet trying to touch the ground to make it a touchdown. And his right can't do it, but his left foot somehow does. And touches ground, and Gus Johnson is just going
nuts,
ape poop all over the place because he was just like, man, he was losing his voice, stroking out. It was hilarious. But no, great, huge win for them. I don't think it matters in the long run because even if they lost this game, I still feel like Indiana was poised to potentially get to the Big Ten championship game and a playoff spot. But this win helps them pretty much cement themselves in that slot because they have Wisconsin next week, which they're at home against Wisconsin. Wisconsin did beat Washington, so maybe they're a little bit more of a game opponent now. And then they've got Purdue the next week. So, I feel like Indiana should smoke both these teams, and then we should see Indiana in Indianapolis. So a lot to play for Indiana. They've got a lot on the line, that, conference championship game and the playoff spot, potentially a bye. So huge game, huge win. Signetti, pulling the smoke off the SIG and just doing his thing. Monster win. What are your thoughts?
Oh my God, I almost died. I was so scared.
That was every Indiana fan watching that game. And I know that because every Indiana fan was posting that. Yeah. Because, they were like, we've had enough blowout wins. Let's give our fans a heart attack. We haven't done that in a while. Because going very early in the game, I think it was like first quarter, 3-play drive. They went 68 yards, touchdown for Indiana. I'm thinking, okay, they got this. And the Indiana defense did a great job handling Penn State. And credit, Penn State is battered, left and right. But they did a good job not, getting too far, out of it. But when they were up 17-7, I'm thinking, okay, or 20-7, I think it was at one point. I'm thinking, okay, Indiana's got 2 possessions here. This is where they put it away. And this is what it was. They were settling for field goals. I mean, they had, it was 10-7, then they got the touchdown, then they kicked another field goal when they were in the red zone. So instead of it being like 24-7, now it's 20-7 and still stays a 2-possession game. They were just, as soon as they got into the red zone, there was something about it where they just could not punch it in. And it literally they scored in the second quarter, and the last time they scored a touchdown was that insane catch at the, end of the game by Cooper. Yeah. So Penn State, they took advantage of Indiana just for whatever reason. The offense was not up to snuff in the second or in the third and the beginning of the fourth quarter, and they waited till literally the last possible moment to wake up and win the game. I don't know if that was by design. I hope not, because again, with the mad scientist that Cignetti is, I honestly wouldn't be surprised if in the post-game interview it was like, what were you thinking? I wanted to give our fans a heart attack. Let them not forget, what Indiana had to go through to get here. Yeah. So they survived literally season-saving touchdown catch by Cooper in Indiana, because if, he gets, that's down, it's what, fourth and goal at the 10? Yeah, instead of a touchdown and you're up, by 3 and you just squib it and win the game. So great win for Indiana. They survived for Penn State. I mean, add it to the grocery list of heartbreak they've had this year. But, I mean, Indiana survives, and sometimes it's better to be lucky than good.
Yeah, and was that the biggest play of the college football season so far?
I would have to say, especially with seeing how Indiana has been this year. I mean, that was absolutely – I've never seen – especially in that situation. I've seen great catches, but in that moment, he literally had to turn his body, and right before his one foot went down, he just barely touched it. Because the first time I saw it, I was like, oh, I don't know if he got it. I thought the other foot hit first, but no, insane. That absolutely one of the best catches I've ever seen.
Yeah, and that ref, if you watched him, he almost runs into them, but then somehow makes his way away from them, and then was still in position to make the call to see his foot go down. I mean, the whole thing is just, it is remarkable. Like Mendoza, if you saw as he's getting hit, he got converged by 2 guys, and he just slings it as hard as he can to the back of the end zone. Just a tremendous play all around. It was the time, the positioning, everything, the whole optics of everything. It was just one of the best plays you'll probably ever see. And you could see it all day on Saturday. People were going nuts all day about that play. It was huge. And this is why we love college football. That play right there is exactly why we love the sport, because, even in a game where it doesn't necessarily matter, it still matters, because Indiana had never won in Happy Valley. And, those fans wanted to see a win. Cignetti talked about that. Even in the interview, he's like, that's not our team. We came here today. We came to win. Our team has never been here. We're going to win this. And they did. And, it's exciting. So let's move on to Oregon, Iowa, another exciting game. This Oregon team, Dante Moore, that pass on that last drive, did you see that?
Yes.
You know what I'm talking about?
That was a dime.
Dude, that is arguably one of the best passes you will ever see. It was the perfect spot at the perfect moment to put them in position to win that game. It was an undefendable ball. That's exactly what it was, because that guy had no way. He couldn't turn around fast enough. The ball was just perfectly right there in his hands. It was just a spectacular ball, man. Dante Moore, I tell you, man, the kid does not get enough hype because, I don't know, Oregon lost the game against Indiana, so I guess the team lost some shine, but I feel like they are one of the better teams because of him. There are obviously a lot of other pieces with Oregon. The defense is very strong. They were able to basically shut down Iowa for most of the game outside of 1 or 2 drives. And, this Oregon team is right there in the mix. They're one of the teams that, will potentially, definitely going to get a playoff spot if they win out. They have a tough road. They have USC, and they've got Washington as well. So they've got a tough road, but I can see them winning at least one of one there. And then I think they have one more game as well. And then, but no, this Oregon team, tough team. I love Dante Moore a ton. I saw him a lot at UCLA. And, I'm hoping, his career keeps going the trajectory it's going, because it's really a nice sight to see. But your thoughts, Ian, on this one?
I mean, you want to talk about better lucky than good, because, man, that throw was as great as it was. He caught it right at the best possible moment, and Oregon got out of dodge and got lucky here, because they were not looking like the Oregon we were expecting. That Iowa defense did a good job, controlling Dante Moore until the fourth quarter. And I think the biggest thing that we weren't talking about was that 2-point conversion they stopped.
Yeah.
Iowa had this huge, it was like a 7-minute, 90-something yard drive that they scored a touchdown on to take the lead. And if they get that 2-point conversion, dude, it's instead of a field goal to win it, you're looking at a field goal to tie it, and you're going to overtime, and God knows what happens then. But absolutely, insane win. Again, something with these upper Big Ten teams finding ways to win on the road is kind of ridiculous and insane plays. But Oregon survives. They're still in the driver's seat in the Big Ten here. Obviously, they need help with jumping ahead of teams like they need Indiana and Ohio State to lose, but they're not out of it yet. So good win for them. And for Iowa, I mean, they almost had it, and they gave them a tough fight. And if you're Oregon, you cannot have an offensive performance like that again. The good news is that the defense showed up, and the Iowa offense definitely isn't as dangerous as compared to other teams, but they cannot, play a game like this for the rest of the year.
Definitely. Okay, moving on to Texas A&M, Missouri. This Missouri team, I feel bad for them, because if Purbuella's in this game's probably a lot closer. They were in the game against Alabama and somewhat in the game against Vandy until their quarterback got hurt, or until Purbuella got hurt. And then now he's out for the year, and the backup is just not as good. Texas A&M was making plays though in defense. They got a sack fumble that netted them a touchdown right there at the end of the half. And, that was a huge spark for them going into the second half. And then, you had huge plays in the run game by Reuben Owens. You had huge plays by Concepcion with a nice screen that goes for a touchdown. Marcel Reed had a decent game. And, this Texas A&M team is just kind of rolling at this point. This game posed a threat with Purbuella. Without Purbuella, it wasn't much of a threat. And now Texas A&M, they've got South Carolina at home, Samford, which, is a joke. Samford just fired their coach, so that's obviously not going to be anything. They're an FCS team. And then the showdown with Texas in Austin. So at this point, I think you can kind of pencil in A&M for the SEC championship game. I don't envision, even if they get a loss, no one really can compete with them, because everyone else will have one loss. The only teams that really stand a chance to go besides A&M are Alabama and Georgia and Ole Miss. Alabama beat Georgia. Georgia beat Ole Miss. So that's why the standings look the way they do. Georgia, I think they only have one more SEC game, and that is
Texas.
Texas. So, yeah, that's a tough one. So we'll see. But Ole Miss, I believe, only has Mississippi State and Florida. And then Alabama has sorry, 1 second.
Well, Auburn definitely. And then I think they
Auburn, yeah. Auburn, and then they have
I think Oklahoma.
Oklahoma, yeah, that's a tough one. I'd like to see how Oklahoma does just with Mateer maybe getting a little healthier here at the end of the year. But still a lot to play. I think you can almost pencil in Texas A&M. It really feels like, even if regardless of the rest of what goes on, I think they're almost assured of going. I don't know. It just feels like it to me. It just feels like they got fortunate enough in their conference slate this year to really not have to play. They didn't have to play Alabama. They didn't have to play Oklahoma, I don't think. They didn't have to play.
They do have to play Texas, yeah.
Yeah, like they have they played very few teams that are the top of the league right now. So, this A&M team got very fortunate to really have the schedule that they did, but they're taking advantage of it because the toughest games they had this year would have been the toughest games would have been LSU and Florida, and then both of them fired their coaches shortly thereafter. So those toughest games are out the window, and then they beat a Notre Dame team, which is good. That's a solid win. There's no doubting that. That's a very good win. But they struggled against Arkansas, who fired their coach, and then they struggled against Auburn, who fired their coach.
Yep.
Seems to be a trend here, but your thoughts on this game, Ian?
Yeah, and I mean, same thing. A&M just kind of was similar to Georgia. Mississippi State was looking like the better team. They had more going on, and they did a very good job getting the crowd out of the game early in Columbia, because that was the only thing, especially with Purview out, that Missouri could kind of rely on. Maybe A&M would get rattled, but they didn't. They stayed focused, and I think that's one thing Elko has done a great job there, is that when the chips are down, they still, maintain the game plan and make sure everything's going on. But they jumped out of a 21-0 lead, and after that, it was kind of on cruise control. And yeah, especially with the schedule, Texas is the last tough one. But even then, I'm not saying they should lose, but they can afford one here because of the tiebreakers. But they're, about to jump into the SEC championship. Although, knocking on wood, because it's A&M. They have black cat history with them.
So what did you say? USF? What is the USF?
There's battered bowl syndrome, and then Texas A&M's is battered Aggie syndrome.
Battered Aggies.
Yeah.
Okay. That's good. Okay, moving on to a couple of close ones here in the ACC. Wake Forest, Virginia. Man, I feel bad for Virginia because Chandler Morris just can't stay healthy.
Yeah.
And their backup's just not as good. He still led them down the field and had them in position to tie or win the game at the end, but they don't make the play on fourth down, and that's it. Tough loss because Wake Forest didn't do a ton in this game. They had a punt return for a touchdown that really kind of was the difference in the pacing of this game. But West Virginia, Virginia just made the mistakes in this one. They had a lot of turnovers in this one that really led to Wake Forest getting the win. 3 fumbles lost. Can't be -3 in the turnover margin. That's not going to be a recipe for success. So Wake Forest gets the win, and they're only 6-3, and I think they're right there in the mix in the ACC, which is funny. But Virginia, again, we keep talking about this. I don't know if people know. I mean, some of our listeners and followers of this channel will know that Virginia lost that game against NC State, but that game against NC State was a non-conference scheduled game, and so that doesn't count towards the ACC. So right now, Virginia, with that one loss in the ACC, is still in the mix to go to Charlotte for the ACC championship game, right there with Georgia Tech. So it's Georgia Tech, Virginia, Pittsburgh, and SMU. And it's funny because Miami is behind all of those teams, but they still have a shot at all this stuff, which is hilarious because they wrote them off a couple weeks ago, last week, and now it's well, still the door's open. But I still feel and I've been thinking about this game all year when I thought about the schedule. That Pitt Miami game at the end of the year. It's such a recipe for disaster for Miami, cold weather. And now Pitt's quarterback is on fire. I don't see any way of Miami winning that game. There's no doubt in my mind that Pitt's going to win that game. But Pitt has, listen to this schedule for Pitt's closing 3 weeks. They have Notre Dame in Pittsburgh, and they have Georgia Tech in Atlanta, and then Miami back at Pittsburgh. That's probably the toughest 3-game stretch to end the year for anybody right now. and like nobody knows about this team. Like there's zero chatter about Pitt because they didn't really have a great schedule, and they lost to West Virginia to start the year, so they were kind of like under the radar. Those 2 games right in a row, it was lost to West Virginia, lost to Louisville, and then all of a sudden they just turned it on. You know, they beat FSU, and they smoked Syracuse, and then they smoked NC State, and then they just beat Stanford pretty significantly. And now there's a lot to play for with them, and you know, I'm intrigued. I'm very intrigued with this Pitt team. But let's get back to Wake Forest, Virginia. You have any thoughts on this game?
Yeah, and I want to give the credit to Wake Forest for, you know, even with the backup quarterback, Virginia still didn't score a touchdown. And that is impressive that we've seen, you know, they still had talent all over the place, especially in the rushing attack, and they still kept them out of the end zone. But it kind of was a kind of, you know, ugly win because the only touchdown was a punt return. There was no offensive touchdown the whole game, and it was just field goal after field goal after field goal. But Virginia, they're still alive in this. And to mention with Pitt, that Georgia Tech Pitt game is going to become an eliminator now because whoever's going to win that will leapfrog the other and likely be in the driver's seat for the ACC. And it's just, you know, it was funny because I mentioned that the American was looking like the chaos conference, and then the ACC was like, nah, we'll take the wheel from here because now it's all over the place. It's, you know, Georgia Tech, we could have probably seen being maybe in the driver's seat, you know, for making it to Charlotte. But, you know, Virginia, Pitt, I mean, SMU is still in there as well with only 1 conference loss. So there's a lot of, you know, still on the table, and it's really wide open for the ACC.
Yeah, it's pretty similar to last year's Big 12, where there was like 6 teams all at the top, and like, you know, 1 game separated all of them. But we'll see. It's a lot to play for. Ton to go down the next 3 weeks for all these teams. Let's move on to another ACC team or ACC game. Cal Louisville. This game was back and forth. It was literally like tied. I don't know how many times, but I think I counted at least 4 or 5 times where it was tied. Like straight up, like boom, they'd score, then they'd score, then they'd score, then they'd score, and it was kind of fun because it was like, oh man, this is like an exciting game, especially how low scoring the Wake Virginia game was. It was nice to see this game where it was like some points, some interesting things going on, and it was only not tied really into overtime where Louisville goes up 3, and then Cal scores at the end to go up 29-26 and to win. You know, Cal's quarterback, super talented kid, freshman. You know, he gets a lot of noise because he does a lot of like amazing things with his arm, and the kid just puts up numbers. He put up 323 in this game. Let's see how I don't even know how to say his name.
Sagapoluti.
How do you say it?
Sagapoluti. Hang on. I don't know.
We tried, folks. We're just too white for this. No. It's the kid is amazing, and I hope he stays at Cal because I like to see these good players at schools that are not as big because it makes it more interesting for all of college football. But the more I look at it, because Mendoza left and went to Indiana, it's more than likely that Cal's going to lose him as well. So, but Miller Moss had a decent enough game in this one. But again, he had mistakes, turnovers, which he needs to really cut those out if they're going to try to take the next step with this Louisville program. You know, Brown for Louisville had a nice game, 136 yards. You know, it was so close. Like I said, tied almost the whole way through, go to overtime, and it was 4th down. And like, I swear, man, like if you are calling plays like with a fast wide receiver, like on your like short yardage, just call a whip route. I'm telling you, like the whip route seems to be undefeated because I don't know any DB that can defend a whip route because you fake inside and then you turn outside and like the DB like loses their footing and almost every time I see it, I'm like, man, it beats beats the DB like every time. It's like, I don't know why it's not called more often. You don't see a whip route in like 90% of play calls when it's a short yardage situation. But Ian, your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, and this was, first of all, just a little thing here. I was playing one of the old NCAA games. I think it was like 11 or 12. And in the conferences, Louisville's in the Big East still, and Cal's in the Pac-12. And now this is an ACC game, so I thought that was funny that Saturday that was going on. But anyways, yeah, this was an insanely entertaining game. Literally back and forth, needing to go into overtime. And it was a matter of who was going to blink. And in overtime, it was, Cal, once they got that stop and, Louisville kicked that field goal, and they were just driving, getting, those high percentage, conversion plays, because it would be like second, third down. That was mostly the thing Cal was doing, was getting to second and third and manageable and just converting off of those. So great game for Cal, especially the big win. They're bowl eligible now that we heading to a bowl game. And for Louisville, I mean, that's a tough one. This is a tough one because I felt like Louisville was, as hot as Cal has been, I felt like Louisville was still the better team. But now they got to, play Clemson and finish the year out. I mean, it's not going to be easy for them because I know they play Clemson and SMU, and then it's the rivalry game against Kentucky.
Yeah, I mean, Clemson is a tough go. Clemson looked pretty good against FSU, and then SMU has that win against Miami. So a lot to play for in the next 2 weeks for Louisville. I don't think the Kentucky game means as much because I think even if they lose that game, they're still – if they go to the ACC championship game, they still will more than likely get into the playoff, because it seems like what the playoff committee has set the standard for is if you're in a conference championship game, losing that game does not cause any problems for getting into the playoff, because for whatever reason, they don't seem to give weight to that loss as ending the season. They're like, nah, it's a good loss, so you still get into the playoffs. Because last year, Clemson, I believe, had 3 losses, right?
Yeah.
And got into the playoffs. So that's the same thing that could happen here with Louisville. So the Kentucky game, I'm not as worried about, but definitely that Clemson SMU game for sure. Okay, moving on. We've got LSU, Alabama. This used to be the game of the century, but now with Brian Kelly being fired and this LSU team looking just listless, it was honestly, it was a very boring game. What I watched of it, it was just nothing was going on, and LSU just could not move the ball at all almost the entire game. They benched Nussmeier. He was 18 of 21, but he only had 121 yards, and he was ineffective. They brought in Van Buren, who looked better because he's more mobile and was able to make some plays against the Alabama defense. But overall, Alabama just looked better. Ty Simpson had another stellar game, 277 yards, a TD. They couldn't run the ball a ton against LSU, but they were able to throw the ball very well. Jeremy Bernard had a really good game. Ryan Williams had a nice touchdown in the end zone. A lot of field goals for Alabama, but in the end, they get the win, and this team is just doing what they can to win. And now with the rest of their schedule, because it's still tough, they got Oklahoma, like we said, and then Auburn, a lot to play for. So, when that first loss happened in the beginning of the year, people were writing them off. They're like, oh, this Alabama team's no good. DeBoer doesn't know what he's doing. He's going to get fired. And they've done nothing but win ever since. And it's a complete night and day difference for them. I love the Ty Simpson story because I love the fact that he stayed at Alabama. He didn't leave. He waited his turn. He wasn't good enough at the time to beat out Jalen Milroe. He stays. He wins the position, and he just dominates. He was a 5-star, yes, so he has talent, but he stayed with it, and he is now making the difference, making the most of it, and it's pretty great to see. It's awesome to see his persistence, his willingness to stay rewarded there. But your thoughts, Ian, of this game?
Yeah, and this was one of the things where a team just wanted it more. You're going to hear that for another game coming up. But Alabama clearly, I mean, they weren't blowing LSU out, but they had control of this whole game. LSU, surprisingly, especially with a guy like Harold Perkins, did a really good job of controlling the run game against Bama, and that was kind of been the main engine this year. Once that run game is going for Bama, it's almost impossible to stop. But Ty Simpson had a good game still. He threw for over 250 yards. And even with Nussmeier, he was, only 3 incompletions, but there just wasn't enough generating, so they had to – this is the equivalent of pulling the goalie or making a goalie change and try to, drum something up. And obviously it didn't work. It was, the one thing I noted too was LSU had like 10 penalties and Bama, I think, only had like 2, 3 the whole game. So Bama was just way more focused and into this game. And honestly, not surprising given the circumstances, but Alabama wins this one handedly. I know the score doesn't, look as bad, but there wasn't really much of a threat, especially once I think Bama was like 17-3 going into halftime. That was pretty much all Bama needed.
Okay, moving on. We've got Navy, Notre Dame. I want to hear your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, like I mentioned too, this is a very exciting game because obviously these two teams, old school, literally as old school as it gets with this rivalry, but obviously the history has been Notre Dame dominating it. And with Horvath out, it was, going to be an uphill challenge because he's just built for this Navy playbook. And Woodson did what he could. I know he had over 100 yards rushing. And obviously they weren't going to be like air raid attack. It's Navy. But, Jordan Love had a great game. He had 2 touchdowns. Carr had over 200 yards passing. Notre Dame played a Notre Dame game. And I think that's what it came down to, is that they were playing into Navy played into what Notre Dame wanted. I don't think anybody got sacked too. Like they didn't get sacked the whole game. Notre Dame did. They were just in control. The offensive line controlled it from there. And for they dominated time of possession. They converted. It was always third and manageable, second and manageable. I didn't see what the yardage was per play, but Notre Dame was just dominating the whole time. And for Navy now with Horvath, we're going to have to see how healthy he is because now, obviously, season's on the line next week with USF, so we're going to see what happens there. But it's always dangerous. I always say this, if you're USF, it's always dangerous when a team gets blown out going into that next game and, because now they like want to take it out on somebody. If you want an example, USF did the same thing to UTSA after losing to Memphis.
Yeah, and like the one thing I just want to point out is I think a lot of people saw that first snapshot of CJ Carr to start the year and they kind of like were whatever about him. But honestly, man, I've been really impressed with him ever since that first game, and he's just done it week in, week out, and he looks better and better. And like, this guy's some dickhead. What did he say? He's just insulting. Oh, now another guy, another jerk comment. Thanks, guys. Whatever. You see him, Ian? You see those? Oh, now I guess we have jerk comments coming. Wow. We've like never had that, so it's kind of funny. Like we finally get some.
I never heard that one. I'm going to use that on somebody. That's a good one.
This guy goes, "Love you guys." Okay, no. So back to the show. Come on now, folks. CJ Carr. The guy looks amazing, and like he's only a redshirt freshman, so he's got a lot to play for, and I'm excited to see what he does over the next couple of years. But still a lot to play for Notre Dame because they have a potential playoff spot here if they win out. So I think they will, but a ton to play for, and CJ Carr looks amazing. But let's move on to the terribleness. I'm going to let you go with your thoughts because I'm just still really upset with this stuff.
He's already dead.
I mean, you know what's funny? I had deja vu. I literally had deja vu because this reminded me, if anybody remembers this, in 2021 when they got blown out against South Carolina and they had a backup like their third string quarterback, and it was like 40-17 they lost to South Carolina. And that's when I knew, yeah, this is it for Dan Mullen, because you can't have that happen. this was now the low point of the season, and I'm not sure this is as bad of a loss, like as embarrassing as maybe like, Georgia Southern in 2013, or, that South Carolina game in 2021, or the LSU game in 2020. Or, oh boy, it's up there, because I should have saved it. It was a picture of an old guy in a retirement home, and it goes, back in my day, Florida had a 33-game winning streak on Kentucky.
Yeah.
Florida hasn't beaten Kentucky and Lexington since 2019. Like, I don't even think anybody tested positive at COVID at that point, the last time that happened.
No.
So we're at that point with the Florida program where they just can't win in Lexington. It's insane. And it didn't matter. Yes, Florida had the better team, but they didn't care. And that's what it came down to, is that it was just a total lack of effort. Clearly, Kentucky, the game meant way more for them and their crowd than it did for Florida. I get Billy Gonzalez doing all he can do, but I think the players know, especially after the Georgia game, what would beating Kentucky do? And I think that's what it was, is that they just were kicking the can down the road. And the only hope I have is, like I said this, I was like, well, Kentucky, it's Kentucky. So maybe when they play the rivals of Tennessee and Florida State, that'll get them motivated. But I wanted to turn the TV off. I was just so upset. It's, again, good thing for Gainesville. Basketball season started, but just a terrible loss. Obviously, you can talk about how bad Lagway played. I mean, they did the right thing in benching him, honestly, because what else are you going to do? You have to do something. And, I mean, Tremolo Jones played okay. I don't know where you go from here. It's just a matter of just getting this season over at this point. But it's, again, ugly loss, and, move on for Kentucky. Good win for them. I mean, obviously that's a big deal because they've never beaten Florida until, the end of the 2010s. And now they're, really dominating the program. But I mean, it's up there because Kentucky by far is the worst team in the SEC, and they just blew out Florida.
Yeah, I mean, they really didn't have for anything for them in this game. I mean, the defense quit. Like, you could tell, like, within like the first couple of possessions, the defense was just like not having it. They were missing tackles. There was no pressure on the quarterback. I mean, I don't even know the quarterback's name for Kentucky, and he had like a monster game. And I'm just like, I don't know. Someone's asking if I think Ohio State is legit. Yeah. Ohio State's legit. Julian Sain's a good quarterback, and Jeremiah Smith is one of the best players in college football. And their defense is really good. But back to Florida, the defense just struggled. The run game for Kentucky was just dominant, and Florida could not do anything offensively. Lagway, 3 interceptions in the first half. That fumble by Daniels. And, it was over. Like, they were down 24-7, 10.5, and the game was done. And, it's a shame because, if there was just any kind of defense like the rest of the year has been like for Florida, they probably could have been closer in this game, and it would have been a more interesting game. They may still have lost, but it could have been like a, 21 to like 17 game. But this game was just a blowout. Jeez, you see these comments, right?
Yeah.
No, it is what it is. The season's over. Napier's fired. I can't wait for the new coach. Maybe it's Lane Kiffin. Who knows? I'm hoping it's him, but we'll see. Okay, last game we got is UCLA, Nebraska in LA. These people. You see these comments?
Yeah.
But no, UCLA, it's a shame because if Nico had just gotten a little bit more out of that first half, like Nebraska was just kind of like dominating there. So it was like they never really could get going. And then they had a field goal at the end of the half that they missed. probably could have given them some momentum going in the second half that they missed it. And then Nebraska did enough to have that 7-point lead late into the game. And then Nebraska makes enough plays on offense to end that game. So credit to Latif, right? That's his name, the quarterback for Nebraska. Yeah. And, he's from LA, from Compton. So, I know he was probably amped to win the game. And, I didn't think he was going to be capable of winning the game, but he was. He did just enough. He made the plays needed, necessary. He didn't make mistakes. And I think he only had like a couple of like incompletions in the game.
I think he only had 2. He was like 13 for 15.
Yeah, so he had a huge game. And then Emmett Johnson had a monster game. He had like 3 TDs, 232 yards total. So he had like a ton of yards in this game. He had a wheel route that went for like 50 yards, like just dominated. And still UCLA was in this game and they had a shot. And, it's crazy, like the fact that UCLA probably should have won this game if they had showed up in the first half. But Nebraska, without their quarterback, without Raiola, and, UCLA just loses here. So tough loss, but, they got a lot to play for here because they still have a shot at a bowl game. So they have 3 games against Ohio State next week. They're not going to win that one. Washington at home, which they should struggle. And then USC at home. Let's see. Nah, whatever. No. I don't know. UCLA, it's going to be tough. If they want a bowl game, they're going to have to really come through here at the end with these last 3 games. But your thoughts on this game, and then we'll call it a show.
Yeah, and for once, it was good to see Nebraska kind of come on the good end of a 1-score game because they've just had like the worst luck we've talked about it, how many like 1-score games they've just barely lost this year, but they got the win and they had that huge win. And I agree with you. If they just, UCLA didn't get off to that slow start. I mean, once they tied at 7-7, it was all Nebraska until the, late third and fourth quarter. So if they just, were making the most of their drives early, UCLA likely was in this game, way ahead of than they would have been against Nebraska. It would have been much more even not coming back from a 28-7 hole. But I think the one thing that made it easier was that, Latif had a good game, but having guys like Johnson, who was both, rushing and catching, receiving the ball was really helpful. He had over 200 yards, both receiving and rushing. He had the 2 receiving touchdowns as well. So having that to fall back on was huge for Nebraska, and they get a big win here because this was definitely, a game they almost fell into the trap for. But, and yeah, UCLA, the effort's there, they're trying, but, getting down 28-7, that's just a tough one to come back from regardless.
Yeah. Okay. That's it. That is the show. Reach us at haterradio.com for all of our articles. I'll probably have one up on the USF Navy game coming up on probably Friday. For all of our socials, just type in Hater Radio. Comes right up. Ian, what's your handle?
Yeah, at Twitter or X, it's at G5Gibson. And at YouTube and Instagram, it's at G_Gator_G. Okay,
that is the show. These friends in our chat, you guys are great. You're having a great time here, enjoying yourself. Jonathan and Shrek and Archer. But join us on Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. And we'll talk to you guys then. Take care.